The Radical Art of Eric Drooker, Part 2, ABC No Rio, August 2nd, 1996. Introduction by Tuli and videographer Norman Savitt.
The entrance to the park. The marchers were met by a wall of cops who blocked their way out as another row of cops closed in from behind. At that point, people tried to disperse. That reminds me of an incident. This was during the Vietnam War at a naval depot in New Jersey. We had gone there to block symbolically and some permanently, or with their bodies, the railroad tracks that led to a ship that was loading munitions for that great party in Vietnam, you know, the party to kill as many people as you can in the shortest period of time. I was there, and I didn't intend to get arrested that day, and we were told that we would have a dispersal notice read, you know, like, you hereby disperse or you will be arrested and beaten the shit out, have the shit beaten out of you in jail. No, you disperse, it's the riot act, basically, you know. If you leave, you're supposed to get off. Now, they did start to read the official police notice, but as one guy was reading it, the other cops were going around and rounding people up and stopping them from getting away. In other words, then they were going to tell the judge, yes, we read the dispersal notice. Sure, they began to, but they really wanted to arrest everybody they could at the spot. Now, since there were so many people there and not that many cops, some of us managed to duck and escape. I remember, you know, I was being grabbed, and I just, a friend of mine and I, we escaped, we ran. There was a bus stop nearby. We kept walking, and a bus just happened to be passing. It was our lucky day, and we escaped without being arrested that day. But here, I don't think Eric was so lucky, and a lot of other people. At that point, people tried to disperse, but cops refused to let anyone leave. The shadow overheard 9th Precinct Captain Kenneth Kelleher tell Chief Allen Hull, "I'm going to arrest them all," Hull replied. "Good." Quickly, a line of cops made their way into the crowd, randomly surrounding more than 30 people by linking arms. Those caught in the cop circle were jumped and arrested. Those who broke out of the trap and took off avoided arrest, the lucky guys and gals. Cops justified their mass arrest of marchers and bystanders by citing a park's regulation that they claim allows no more than 20 people to gather in a city park without a permit. Now, I wonder if there was 19 people and a pregnant woman there, whether that would be considered 20 people. I think that would be a question for the Supreme Court to decide, don't you think? And let's see. Well, no more than 20. Among those arrested were Rabbi Fried, maybe he could have given a drusha on that, whose synagogue provides AIDS patients with pot, and shadow artist Eric Drooker, who was violently choked as other cops held his hands behind his back. Several of those arrested were roughed up and beaten by cops who refused to tell anyone what they were being charged for. I can't remember when I met Eric Drooker, but I think it was at an activity. We were activists to prevent or try and protest and prevent the eviction of the homeless from Tompkins Square Park several years ago. Now, Eric Drooker is in the great tradition of radical graphic artists that goes way, way back. I don't know how far, probably to Da Vinci and Michael. No, well, all good art, I think, is radical, but specifically political art. The people I remember from the modern period include Daumier, Courbet and Nadar, who were active participants in the Paris Commune of 1871. Pissarro, the anarchist Pissarro, one of the fathers of the Impressionist movement, Masriel, Belgian woodcut artist, and the fucking commie Picasso. These were all anarchists or communists or anarcho-communists or communist anarchists, democratic anarcho-communist anarchists. And in Germany, in the first part of the century, the immortal George Gross and Hartfield, and our own America, people like Art Young, John Sloan, Jackson Pollock, Ben Shahn, and in the 60s, the great Ron Cobb and Art Crumb. Now Norman is going to tell you about the event that took place at ABC No Rio at a little while ago, and talk about the slideshow that Eric and his friends presented. Norman.
Okay, well, here it is. This is the Eric's poster from the slide presentation you're about to see. And let's see, it was a book party for illuminated poems by Allen Ginsberg, which Eric illustrated, and illustrated Allen's poems. And the evening featured jazz poet extraordinaire Terry Kid Lucky Lewis, who was a rapper who was coming on in the basement in the latter part of the evening. And then there was Carla Cubitt, who was a belly dancer, who was in the earlier part of the evening. Maybe we'll see some of that. And then Moroccan fiddler Hafid, who accompanied Carla, and some drummers. Eric was one of the drummers. And the apocalyptic folk singer Stefan Said is listed over here, but he had something even more apocalyptic came up for him, and he didn't show up. But it was Friday, August 2nd, and Eric called it A Midsummer Night's Madness. And it was a fun evening, and I hope you enjoy it.
And what's the title of the book and the publisher?
The Illuminated Poems, and the publisher is, I don't know who the publisher is.
4 windows, 8
4
doors?
windows and 8 doors.
Or is it 8 doors and an elevator?
3 walls and a roof.
You'll find it if you look for it.
Yeah.
Sit down. Sorry about this standing room only. Early one morning. So if you're an artist in New York City, especially in this neighborhood, it's never hang up what you're going to draw. You just look out the window and you get inspired. I look out my window one morning and I see these guys, and right away I'm envious and kind of jealous of these dudes because they're in a union. They get paid union scale. And I always wonder if artists, if we're ever going to get that one together. Okay, no one draws or paints anything until we get paid. The theme of tonight's, what do you call it? I don't want to call it a lecture. Okay, Midsummer Night's Madness. The theme is the neighborhood itself, growing up in the Lower East Side. And, or just growing up in any city, anywhere on the planet. I think that city dwellers develop a very keen sense of, well, as a survival mechanism, we develop just a different way of seeing things. There's so much death and decay all around that we develop unusual places of finding beauty. That's it. A little bit later that morning, kind of a bird's eye view. I actually don't live this high up, an artistic license. Pretend you're a pigeon kind of flying through the air. The pigeons definitely have the best view of this city, the most objective view of humanity, I think. If you look down on them. I wish I was a pigeon in the sky. I wish I was a pigeon in the sky. Flying through the air, I wouldn't even care. And I wish I was a pigeon in the sky. That's the way that goes. So this is where I was born, Manhattan Island, which I always think of as like living on the back of a giant snapping turtle, giant reptile. Under the surface, this kind of reptile is running the show, and all of the city dwellers on the surface are but dimly aware of what motivates us, or what's really going on, or where we're going. I feel very strongly that we're living in a mythological period right now, where all of us living in the 20th century are living in a mythical time. You know the story of the Tower of Babel, right? People wanted to build a tower up to heaven. The guy got pissed off, getting too high. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven." And the Lord said, "Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth. And they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. Yeah, I came across that somewhere. Then I picked up my dictionary. I just looked up Babel in the dictionary. It's a city where Noah's descendants, who spoke one language, tried to build a tower to heaven. For this presumption, they lost the ability to speak intelligibly to each other. kind of familiar, living in Manhattan Island, especially the Lower East Side with all those different languages, the confusion of tongues, right? Then in the dictionary, this noun, babble, a place or scene of noise and confusion, hubbub, racket, din, uproar. Or the verb infinitive, to babble, to utter meaningless sounds, to talk foolishly or excessively. This is another myth that I feel is very much alive in the 20th century. You all recognize this dude, right? Who is this? Who? Okay. Close. Daedalus, that's right. You actually, I guess you couldn't tell just from this picture. In fact, that's the question. Is this Daedalus, the artist, the designer, the guy who invented the wings and escaped from the labyrinth, or is this his compulsive teenage son, Icarus, who wouldn't stop and kept flying higher and higher into the air when his father was telling him, the wings, they're made of wax. If you keep flying close to the sun, their wings are going to melt. I'm telling you. Of course, Icarus was a teenager and wasn't about to listen to his father, and he was having a good time. He was flying right into the sun. That was the deal. The king had commissioned Daedalus, the artist, to build a labyrinth to put the Minotaur. And some years later, Daedalus himself got on the king's bad side. Apparently, it's never too difficult to get on the king's bad side. And as punishment, the king threw both him and his son in the maze. And that's when he had to invent these wings. So they worked, but his son... Well, I keep thinking a recent example of the Icarus syndrome in our culture is Kurt Cobain, right? Burned out, flew right into the sun. Or Jimi Hendrix or Joplin or his landscape of rock and roll is littered with the bodies of people who burned out from the Icarus syndrome. But more recently, it occurred to me that our whole Western civilization seems to be suffering from the terminal stages of the Icarus syndrome. That is, the wings that we invented, the technology that was supposed to set us free. Remember? All the machinery from the Industrial Revolution was supposed to liberate us, but then we seem to have gotten carried away with all of this hardware and technology, and we seem to be in a mad rush for some reason, as if there was a finite amount of time to fly directly into the sun. This is the resurrection of Icarus. It always comes around again if you wait long enough. A lot of the color paintings here are from a new book that I finally finished with Allen Ginsberg. A collaboration with his poems and then my paintings and drawings to go with them. This is a poem about Neil Cassidy, burned out really young. This is one of the illuminations for the poem Howl. I assume everyone knows that inside and out, right? But anyway, it was written 2 years before I was born, 1956. Howl was written 40 years ago. And it seems to ring true, or even truer now. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. We all know someone who OD'd, who jumped out the window. The pusherman wants $10 more. The pusherman wants $10 more. When he gave it to me, he said it would be free. Now the pusherman wants $10 more. Oh, there goes Ginsberg now on his roof. Doesn't even have sense to come in out of the rain. Someone want to hand me one of those books? Maybe I could. I'm just kind of winding up a book tour, and I was was with Allen a lot of the way. He would read the poems while I projected the slides. Allen's in L.A. right now, so yeah. But he sends his regards. This was a fairly recent poem that had been unpublished that I discovered. He basically just gave me all his poetry and trusted me to come up with something. We've known each other just from the street, from the neighborhood over the years. He had been collecting street posters all this time, and we realized we were coming from a similar place. It was kind of natural harmony, I guess you'd call it. Rock song. I'm up in the lightning tower. Blake is refighting Milton below. African Americans yelling at Latinos with bombs. Crack, wanna blow? African Americans with babies at their breasts. Europeans drinking coffee, cashing checks. Vietnamese and Chinese behaving correct. Koreans and Texans thumping their chests. I'm up in the lightning tower, could stay up here 100 years, shouting orders through a diamond megaphone, till the blood rain turns to humor tears. I'm up in the lightning tower, the spiritual war goes on. There's a million Caesars climbing up the stairs. I gotta fight them with one heart on. I'm up in the lightning window, I can see the blare of the bombs. The noisier the surplus airplanes thunder, the more I sit down calm. Up on the lightning rooftop, it's raining human bones and blood. I haven't got a holy umbrella. Is there anything I could do that's any good? I'm dancing on the lightning cloud. I don't know how I got the power. I kept hearing everybody screaming and lay down to sleep dream for 1 hour. Lightning tower, lightning ocean, lightning window, lightning cloud, lightning solitude, lightning delusion, lightning consciousness in the crowd. This is a fairly early poem he wrote around the time of Howell, the Sunflower Sutra. That's Allen on the left holding the sunflower, and that's Kerouac on the right hand side holding the bottle, sitting on the tracks. I walked on the banks of the Tin Can Banana Dock and sat down under the huge shade of the Southern Pacific locomotive to look at the sunset over the Box House Hills and cry. Jack Kerouac sat beside me on a busted, rusty iron pole. Companion, we thought the same thoughts of the soul, bleak and blue-eyed and sad-eyed, surrounded by the gnarled steel roots of trees of machinery. So I grabbed up the skeleton-thick sunflower and stuck it at my side like a scepter and delivered my sermon to my soul, and Jack's soul too, and anyone who will listen. We're not our skin of grime. We're not our dread, bleak, dusty, imageless locomotive. We're all golden sunflowers inside, blessed by our own seed and hairy naked accomplishment bodies, growing into mad, black, formal sunflowers in the sunset, spied on by our eyes under the shadow of the mad locomotive, riverbank, sunset, Frisco, hilly tin can evening sit-down vision. This is a poem called The Lion for Real. The guy comes back home from a long day at the office, finds a lion in his living room. I came home and found a lion in my living room. Rushed out on the fire escape screaming, "Lion! Lion!" 2 stenographers pulled their brunette hair and banged the window shut. I hurried home to Patterson and stayed 2 days. Called up my own Reichian analyst, who kicked me out of therapy for smoking marijuana. "It's happened," I panted. "There's a lion in my room." "I'm afraid any discussion would have no value." He hung up. The painting didn't really go to any specific poem of Allen's. It just sort of captured the mood of many of his poems. Native New York. What happens to you if you fall asleep on the L train? The first picture in the book. I figured it was a good place to start things out. Brain. People know that one? He recorded it as a song back in the 80s. It got a lot of play on the college radio station. It's pretty funny. The poems that I selected, in effect I edited the book, but I tended to lean towards either the more political poems of Allen's or else just the funniest ones. Bird Brain runs the world. Bird Brain is the ultimate product of capitalism. Bird Brain, chief bureaucrat of Russia, yawning. Bird Brain ran FBI 30 years, appointed by F.D. Roosevelt, and never chased Cosa Nostra. Bird Brain apportions wheat to be burned, keeps prices up on the world market. Bird Brain lends money to developing nation police states through the International Monetary Fund. Bird Brain never gets laid on his own. He depends on his office to pimp for him. Bird Brain offers brain transplants in Switzerland. Bird Brain wakes up in the middle of the night and arranges his sheets. I am Bird Brain. I rule Russia, Yugoslavia, England, Poland, Argentina, United States, El Salvador. Bird Brain multiplies in China. Bird Brain inhabits Stalin's corpse inside the Kremlin wall. Bird Brain dictates petrochemical agriculture in African desert regions. Bird Brain lowers North California's water table, sucking it up for Orange County agribusiness banks. Bird Brain harpoons whales and chews blubber in the tropics. Bird Brain clubs baby harp seals and wears their coats to Paris.
What's going on? Yeah, Clyde is wearing low top.
Here we come to the story within the story. Dreams within dreams. Right? I came across this poem in some book I found in my grandmother's attic. It was at the very beginning of the book. It was an example of primitive poetry, translated roughly into English. An Eskimo hunter, a seal hunter, was out hunting one day, and the piece of ice he was standing on broke, and he went floating out to sea. And he made up this song. I am joyful, this is good. Roughly translated. My country is nothing but slush. That is good. So the story went that in order to keep the circulation going, he was jumping up and down on this cake of ice that kept growing smaller and smaller all the time. He was out there for about a week, flapping his arms up and down like wings just to keep the circulation going.